Washington, the rising floodwaters of Tropical Storm Harvey will add another pressing issue to an already tense fiscal showdown that faces Congress as lawmakers return next week from a month-long recess. The devastating storm will likely require a multi-billion-dollar emergency relief measure that must somehow find its way through a Congress already contending with a potential government shutdown on October 1. A must-pass measure to raise the government's statutory borrowing limit and a month's overdue budget needed to secure a promised overhaul of the tax code. The prospect of a disaster aid package is also reviving raw emotions from after Hurricane Sandy, when Northeastern Republicans found themselves pitted against conservative colleagues from other regions, including most of the Texas delegation, who objected to the roughly $50 billion relief package for the 2012 storm. With Texas still being pelted by rain, a few Republicans were already relitigating that bitter fight. The growing stack of issues presents the latest and perhaps most significant challenge yet for Trump-era Republicans seeking to show that they can responsibly govern the country now that they control the White House and both houses of Congress. I suspect that September will be a test for all of us, said Representative Charlie Dent, Republican of Pennsylvania and a senior member of the Appropriations Committee. We have to demonstrate to people that we have a capacity for governance and for helping our fellow citizens who are just in dire need. Above all else, time is running short. The Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, has urged Congress to raise the debt limit by September 29. Republican leaders are intent on doing so, the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, said last week that there was zero chance that Congress would allow a default on federal debt. But they risk rankling conservatives who have pushed for any debt limit increase to be paired with spending cuts. Days after that deadline, Congress needs to pass a spending measure by October 1 to keep the government open. Speaker Paul D. Ryan of Wisconsin acknowledged last week what seems inevitable on Capitol Hill: lawmakers, he said, will likely need to pass a stopgap spending measure in order to avoid a shutdown. Such a measure would be a disappointment for Republicans who promised a return to the orderly funding of the government. But a Republican in the White House has not eased that process. Last week, President Trump threatened a shutdown unless Congress funds the wall that he has promised to build along the southern border with Mexico. Republicans also must reauthorize the National Flood Insurance Program, which is currently $25 billion in debt to the Treasury and facing a wave of new claims from Harvey, and provide funds for the Children's Health Insurance Program. Mr. Trump predicted on Monday that Congress would make quick work of a storm relief package. Recovery will be a long and difficult road, and the federal government stands ready, willing and able to support that effort, he said at a news conference with President Sauli Niinisto of Finland. Mr. Trump said the storm money was a separate issue from the possibility of a government shutdown. This is going to go really very, very quickly, he said. But those promises aside, large relief packages do not necessarily sail through. Lawmakers and their aides said discussions about eventual federal aid were still preliminary, since much of the Gulf Coast was still being pounded with rain. There's no way they can give you any reasonable estimate about how much this will cost until the water goes down and they can go back in to assess the damage, said Representative Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma and a senior member of the Appropriations Committee. It's going to take a while to figure this out. 4 years after only 49 House Republicans, and just one from the Texas delegation, voted to approve the aid package drafted in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, Mr. Cole said he expected to see far more support in his Southern-dominated caucus for Harvey-related assistance. As a hardline House conservative from South Carolina, Mick Mulvaney, then a representative, was a leading voice in calling for Sandy-related spending to be offset with across-the-board cuts. Mr. Mulvaney now directs the White House Office of Management and Budget. I wonder if he'll be demanding offsets now that he's OMB director? Mr. Cole mused. Probably not. House fiscal hawks fear that the 36-member Texas delegation along with a publicity-obsessed president will ram through a multi-billion-dollar package without any regard to the deficit. There's not going to be any pushback from the administration, and this thing will move," predicted Representative Mark Sanford, Republican of South Carolina, adding, "It is indicative and reflective of the fact that fiscal discipline is out of vogue in Washington." The early discussions about disaster